A lot of people do not understand my politics simply because they don't understand that politics is really a matter of playing chess rather than playing checkers. Liberals, unfortunately, are so stupid that they don't understand chess. The Russians understand it, which I'm going to get to in a little while, but the liberals here in America absolutely don't. They think that wearing those thick glasses and reading lots of books or writing lots of books, they think that makes them smart. I believe the proper term for them is to call them the liberal intelligentsia. But when you really analyze these people, you understand that these people are stupid. They're driven by rhetoric, and they're also driven by their own bullshit. Basically, their heads are up their ass and they're smelling their own farts. Now, before I even get started with the story, yes, this is a channel I'm subscribed to. It's called the American Military News, and I get these, how should I say, text messages towards my messenger, or I think you can also have it sent to your email, or you could probably get a text from American Military News. And you hear about things that happen as soon as they happen, such as mass murders and stuff like that, or anything that has to do with the military going on. I'm going to try to make this quick. But I want to say this at the outset. First of all, not only are the liberals in this country stupid, but a lot of the conservative Republicans are too. Some people who follow me closely and watch all my videos, they would know that I was pro-Trump right up until Trump went up against China. When Trump went up against China, I recognized very, very quickly that he was going to lose everything. There are these dudes in the manosphere. I got on the internet arguing with these dudes that Trump was going to lose his presidency. And I did that more than a year before Election Day that ultimately cost him his presidency in 2020. And I knew that he was going to lose his presidency because as soon as you put tariffs on China, that right there killed you. And now look what happened. In 2019, I was following Chinese news and I had heard about a SARS-like illness that was causing factories and some portions of China to start shutting down. That was before, obviously, we went into lockdown and quarantine in March of 2020. I lived in China during the first SARS outbreak. That was in 2003. And by the time I was leaving China to come back to America, I went to Japan first. And that's when I first heard that there was a major problem in China. Even though while I was in China, I had heard that there was some issue with some sickness. But at that time, nobody really understood what SARS was. This was before people started wearing masks. This was a long time ago. iPhone didn't exist until 2007, so obviously I wasn't making videos about it. So I couldn't document all the time I was in China. But with my apocalypse driving, that's like one example of me being able to document a crisis as it unfolds over a long period of time. So in a way, these videos that I do are kind of like a timeline to some extent. So anyway, it says Biden close to rollback of Trump's China tariffs to fight inflation. To make it very simple, let me help you understand a little bit about inflation. Inflation happens because the government basically prints too much money. The whole point of the Federal Reserve is supposed to be controlling the money supply and controlling inflation by controlling the money supply. Paul Volcker, a lot of people talk about raised interest rates, and he raised it pretty high. High interest rates are actually good for an economy because high interest rates mean that you do not willy-nilly borrow money. In 2001, Alan Greenspan, in response to 9/11, dropped interest rates. The government's reasoning behind that is if you drop interest rates, people will spend money. The fear was that after 9/11, people were going to start saving money and hoarding money because they were afraid. So Alan Greenspan raised interest rates. His raising of interest rates created a bubble in the economy, obviously in the housing market and in the credit system, which, credit cards, auto loans, and whatnot. By 2008, that bubble basically popped because I guess at that point the government was very partisan about how to deal with it. The worst thing that you can do for one of these bubbles is to keep inflating it. It's like if you have a heroin addict. If a heroin addict passes out on your front lawn, you don't give them more heroin. What you do is chain them up or something so that they can't fight you. And then you force feed them like water and you give them healthy food and everything. And eventually the heroin will get out of their system. And, as long as they stay chained up, they're not able to go out and get more heroin because otherwise they'll steal your television, they'll go out and buy more heroin. But that's how you have to deal with a heroin addict. What you don't do is you give them more credit cards and you give them more auto loans and you give them more home loans. Low interest rates cause inflation because all of the money is basically credit. It's not real. It's printed. So what ends up happening is you end up needing more and more and more credit to buy the things you want because now everybody has access to that credit and everybody basically has access to fake money. When you have high interest rates, that causes people to be more responsible. That causes people to be more fiscally conservative. But what we're dealing with is an economy that doesn't want people to be fiscally conservative. It doesn't want people to watch how much they spend. What it wants women to run out, spend up all their money going on vacations, using their student loans to go on vacations, using their student loans to buy clothes that they never could have afforded on a regular job. It has men going out buying PlayStation 5s, Xboxes, sitting in their girlfriend's house playing video games in their underwear, drinking a beer. That's the problem with low interest rates. It creates false growth. Now, in order to get rid of the inflation that is going to incur, what we really need to do is outsource that inflation to another country. We send useless US dollars to China and to other countries like India. And people in those countries take that money, hoard that money. They keep it bundled up. Have you ever seen those images where you see in Iran and you see in Iraq how when we busted into Saddam Hussein's palace in Iraq, he had closets filled with US dollars? Well, yes, the dollar is the reserve currency, but these other countries, they hold on to those dollars. They don't spend them. What they do is they take those dollars, they hold on to them, and when they have the chance to come to America to buy up our property, that's what they'll spend their money on. Or perhaps they'll buy American buildings. Perhaps they'll buy American property abroad. Perhaps they'll come to your neighborhood and buy up all the houses. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, ask any of your friends or family if they've bid on a house lately. Ask them if they were able to buy that house. Ask them how quickly it was that they were outbid by some foreign money influence. Ask them how quickly they were outbid by some Eastern European who just got $40 billion from America because the Democrat Congress quickly rushed them $40 billion despite the fact that Vladimir Putin's rolling them over. If you ask anybody who's been bidding on houses lately, you will quickly understand that these people are being outbid by hundreds of thousands of dollars and they can't buy the properties that they want. But they don't understand, where's this money coming from? Well, this money is coming from overseas. This money was already there, and it was there before you tried to attempt to apply for a loan. It was there before you attempted to bid on a property that you wanted. I have friends right now who tried to bid on a $1.2 million property and got outbid for $1.3 million. And she didn't understand why. And I had to explain it to her. And by the time I was finished explaining it to her, she understood. Because I tried to break it down, make it simple. Biden has no choice but to talk to our quote-unquote enemies. He has no choice. Their inflation is high because Americans can't spend that money outside. During the pandemic, this government shut down American production, but it started printing stimulus welfare checks, and that caused demand to go up. There was no place else to put those welfare checks except the stock market, the cryptocurrency market, and Amazon, among others, Amazon and eBay. People were buying shit left and right, having shit delivered to their house. I just want you to take a look back at the receipts that you have for all that shit that while you were stuck in your house during the pandemic, all the stuff you bought. I can tell you a lot of the stuff I bought. You remember how I built a flight sim? I literally built a flight simulator in my house because I was that fucking bored during the pandemic. I went out, I paid $250 for a controller, a joystick controller. I paid $300 for a flight stand to sit it on, to mount it on. I paid like $200 or $300 for a aircraft looking chair. I paid what? I bought a GeForce 3090. That shit was $2,000. So you start to understand what I'm saying. I've watched you people. You people have Amazon doing round trips to your house. Amazon's back and forth to your house so much they ought to be on a train. eBay, back and forth to your house so much they ought to be a train. If you really were honest with yourself, you'd look through your credit card statements. You'd be like, you know what? I wasted a lot of fucking money. And I won't even really call it waste because a lot of you were bored. You were sitting at home. There was nothing to do. I totally understand that. You couldn't even travel. You couldn't go anywhere. The only thing there really was for you to do was stay home, watch TV, pay money to Netflix, Disney, Hulu, and sit back and eat. And that's why everybody gained weight during the pandemic. So I'm not angry. I totally understand. But the reason why Biden's being forced to talk to our enemies is ultimately because there's no place for us to put this inflation. There's just no place to do it. The cryptocurrency market has collapsed. The stock market has fallen about 8,000 points, give or take what day you look at it. And here we go. Joe Biden may announce as soon as this week a rollback of some U.S. tariffs on Chinese consumer goods, as well as a new probe into industrial subsidies that could lead to more duties in strategic areas like technology. So let's understand what this means. America is basically a belligerent at this point, and they know that they're going to have problems with the Chinese in the future. So what they're really trying to do is they're trying to figure out ways to create computer chips and more of that silicon technology here so that we're not so reliant on these overseas shipments. A lot of this garbage being made in China and Shenzhen, such as iPhones, Xboxes, PlayStation 5s, all of this stuff, America knows that we're going to have problems getting our hands on this stuff in the future. So what they're ultimately trying to do is they're trying to figure out ways to, they don't want to bring it back to America per se, because these stupid fucking liberal Democrats know that that would actually create jobs in this country. So they'll give you all types of reasons why they can't do it. Oh, it'll cost too much. Oh, the Americans don't want to do those jobs. They don't want to work on supply lines. Blah, 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 fucking blah. So it says Biden has not yet made any official final decisions, and the timing could slip, according to people familiar with the deliberations, who asked not to be identified without permission to discuss private conversations. It would mark the first major policy step on trade ties between the world's two biggest economic powers. The president in recent weeks held a number of meetings with senior economic advisors where options for decisions on the Trump-era tariffs were discussed, according to the people. Hints that the Biden administration is considering an easing in some of the tariffs on $300 billion in Chinese imports have multiplied as inflation has accelerated, putting pressure on U.S. officials to find ways to tamp down prices paid by consumers for everyday merchandise. Biden said last month he'll be talking to Chinese President Xi Jinping soon and told reporters he was in the process of making up his mind about whether to lift tariffs. Some members of Biden's cabinet suggest he use the upcoming call with Xi to ask him for reciprocal tariff cuts on American goods currently facing import duties. Though that idea was quickly shot down, the people said. Shot down by who? I think that's the question we should be asking. A White House spokesperson or spokeswoman said no decision on the tariffs had been made, but the administration wants to ensure they are aligned with economic and strategic priorities and don't unnecessarily raise costs for Americans. Well, here's your problem. When you're producing the majority of your shit in another country, especially a country that is strategic enough to control the price of their currency as to give their workers an unfair advantage, you really don't have a choice but to keep making the stuff in that country unless you attempt to bring the production back to your own and the sticker shock of items be so high that people, for the most part, either can't pay for it or refuse to pay for it. That's ultimately what's happening with gasoline. We have done everything that we could to make it so that there's no new refineries, there's no new drilling. We have basically put a cap on our own oil production, and we're going after our own strategic oil production, or I should say our strategic oil reserves. And we're still importing oil by asking the Saudis to produce more oil. It's not enough. The mere fact that the government has, in many cases, paused or suspended the gas tax in these states and is simultaneously dipping into the strategic oil reserve, but yet you can look at gas and see that gas is $5 a gallon, plus it's actually closer to $6 depending upon where you are. That should tell you right there that what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a government that does its best to create problems and force the people to suffer. What Trump did that was smart was focused on creating energy. Energy is the ability to do all work. If you can make cheap energy, you can have a rising economy that doesn't cost as much to rise. What we've got now is a bunch of moron liberals who we're going to be doing our best to vote out in November. They're going to try that cheat by mail shit, and they're going to try to cheat however they can. But it's important that we pay very close attention to the election, come out, vote, make sure you keep as many receipts of your vote as you can, because these cheaters are going to do whatever they can to hold on to power. But as long as the election is handled properly, in as many places as it needs to be handled, you're going to see the backlash of the American people against this nonsense. Come the end of this November, the Republicans will probably have a red wave that'll wipe the Democrats out of power. Kamala Harris, one thing they don't talk about, she has, as vice president, her job is to break ties in the House of Representatives. She's broken a whole lot of ties, and they don't even want to talk about the record that she's raising. The reality is, if it wasn't for the Senate, she'd have been able to push through a lot of agenda on her own because of her breaking of the ties in the House of Representatives. Come November, if the Democrats lose the House and they lose the Senate, this Biden agenda basically comes to an end, but quick. So by 2024, he'll be a lame duck for the next 2 years. So that's what I'm counting on. This is chess, not checkers, people. So the Biden administration has no choice but to deal with the Chinese. They have no choice, which is ironic because they were trying to claim that they were going to put sanctions on the Chinese if the Chinese weren't tougher on the Russians. You can't fight two wars at the same time. There's a saying that only a fool fights a war on two fronts. But it takes the heir to the throne of the king of fools to fight a war on several fronts. America, under Biden, is literally trying to fight a war on several fronts. These people do not understand war. They're making it up as they go along. They are the most incompetent administration I've seen ever. And the sad thing about it is that when I look back at Trump's administration, if Trump had simply left the Chinese alone and kept his mouth shut for a little while, he could have probably held on to his presidency. But because he couldn't do those two things, It allowed these Democrat cheat by mailers to get into office. I saw the entire thing coming. I said it aloud as many times as I could. Of course, you have to worry about being shadow banned on the internet because YouTube, if they don't like what you're saying, if Facebook doesn't like what you're saying, if Twitter doesn't like what you're saying, you already know what that turns into. That turns into a shadow ban. I'm going to keep saying what I'm saying, and the people who hear it will hear it, whether I'm on one platform or the other. But that's ultimately what it comes down to. So during the beginning of the Russia curb stomping of Ukraine, one of the people who'd been on my Facebook for a very long time, I think maybe even up to about 10 years, he decides that he wants to tell me that when I was posting the stories that I was posting about the Russia-Ukraine war that ran contrary to what he was hearing or what he believed about his pro-Ukraine stance. He told me that he was unfriending me simply because I was putting forth pro-Russian propaganda. That was basically what he said. He said that, oh, you're in love with totalitarians and despots and you're putting forth pro-Russian propaganda. Basically, he's another liberal with his head up his ass. That was 6 months ago when this first began, when the Russians first invaded the Ukraine with their special operation that they call it, because it's not a war. A war is basically when you have a battle between two evenly matched opponents. This isn't a war because Ukraine's getting its ass kicked. 6 months ago, I remember having to argue with people about the Russian advance because they were being lied to on MSNBC and CNN and Fox News as to how well the Russians were doing. But the entire time, I knew that they were lying. For example, you remember that lie that they told about the ghost of Kiev? You remember how they told you that this dude he was like one fighter and he's shooting down multiple like a lot of, they said that the guy shot down like 49 fighters of the Russians. It's really easy to know that that's bullshit. I mean, that's such a lie that if you put it in a movie like Top Gun, nobody would believe it because they're like, this is bullshit. That's not possible. Then it was exposed. And then you found out it was a lie. And I was arguing with somebody else. He was, oh yeah, well the Russians lost 5,000 troops within the first 3 days. And I was like, what? But he watches MSNBC every fucking day, so what are you going to do? How are you going to argue with that? How are you going to argue with that brainwashing? Well, now here we are 6 months in. And these people are so stupid that they don't understand the idea of a protracted war. They don't understand long-term war. They thought that the Russians were supposed to blow up Ukraine and do whatever they did within like 2 or 3 days. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're slowly and methodically wearing down the Ukraine, and they are slowly and methodically destroying the Ukraine's army. So basically, the Russians may never have to do this again because there'll be nothing left of Ukraine to fight back. What the Russians are doing is slow, it's methodical, and the liberal media here in the West, they don't understand it. The longer this goes on, the more political cost it will have for the Biden administration, the Boris Johnson administration, Greece, Germany. They don't understand. I don't know if they understand it or not because they don't show you signs that they do. They have constantly got on TV. They've constantly come on the internet. They're talking about how badly the Russians are doing. And the Ukrainians just blew up a Russian tank. Yeah, everybody clap. Yay! Woo! They blew up a tank. Or they shot down a helicopter. They shot down a Russian helicopter. Everybody clap. Yay! Woo! Yeah. It's like you people have turned into a bunch of seals. It's like all you got to do is hold some sardines and just toss them. And the seals clap on command. And they do that so that they can get their sardine. It's disgusting what has happened to the media here. It's absolutely disgusting. So I'm not going to read any of this. Basically, the point is, you look at this map. Is you don't you see that's the whole thing. You don't have to read any of them. All you got to do is look at the maps. This is the New York Times. Now I know somebody is going to say, the New York Times is shit. I use it for bird lighting my bird cage or something like that. The bottom line is, even they have to admit that the Russian aggression looks like this. If you don't understand anything, all you need to understand is that they're literally wiping that place out. And that's just it. So my thing is, these people, I think they've done their best to shift the narrative. They are, at this point, the liberal media is desperate for more mass murders and school shootings because they know that this war is an absolute loss for the Biden administration. They got themselves involved in something that they were not willing and not able to see to the end, because the end is an end that they can't accept. The end is an end where Russia wins and they lose. All of their sanctions, all they really did was take away businesses and stuff that the Russian people really didn't need for the most part. McDonald's, Starbucks, all of those companies that are literally causing diabetes and kidney failure here in America. Yeah, well, the Russians don't need those. They froze up a lot of Russian money. That's true. But the issue is, Russia is so energy rich. You know what? Hey, guess what, guys? When you're pumping oil, you can make more money. Did you know that? Did you know that you could sell more? You could sell oil to China. You could sell gas and oil and coal to all of the non-NATO countries. And you'd be surprised when you're a country of 144 million. You really don't need a whole lot to get by. The Russians, their quality of life may be resembling what the 90s look like, post-Chernobyl, post-Soviet Union downfall. But the reality is, those people can get by. They're not weak like American teenagers who are killing themselves because somebody calls them a name on the internet. They're not weak like the average American who goes into a store and starts complaining about seeing the manager because her grass-fed veal has a little pork next to it. It's like, you people don't understand what you're dealing with. I'm really disappointed by the way the American news has gone. They are so subjective. They are so rhetorical at this point. They just talk in rhetoric, basically. And meanwhile, our enemies are getting stronger. And not only are our enemies getting stronger, they're making alliances with other enemies of ours. So ultimately, it's going to be a countdown. The Biden administration doesn't have long it just doesn't have that much longer. So it's going to be like a countdown until they're gone. All these libs who are in office, who see the writing on the wall, they should be packing their bags now, because this summer is probably going to be one of the most depressing summers for the American people on record. You can't even fly anywhere because you don't have pilots to fly anywhere. Why don't you have pilots? Well, because some moron thought that it was a good idea to force pilots to get vaccinations and said you can't come to work without one. And the pilot said, you know what? I'm going to retire early. So pilots that you would have had in the system, you no longer have. And now that they're no longer in the system, I just read a story. It said American Airlines said that they got like thousands of pilots that aren't there to fly the planes or whatnot. And, well, you know what I'm talking about, because you've probably seen some of these stories depending upon your own locality. You've probably seen that the airlines are so clogged up and back ordered. I took my family in a video I just made the other day to Delta Airlines. I ain't never seen that many people waiting outside. I've never seen it. Not at the airport. It's a security hazard to have that many people outside. But if you looked at my video, the last apocalypse driving I did, you see all these people waiting outside of the airline's the entrance area. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. But then you think about it in context. You're like, oh, yeah, it does make sense. There's a lot of canceled flights. This is what happens when you have pathetic, shitty leadership. And then that's the other big thing, the gun violence. So my governor thinks that it's a good idea that she thinks that she can force gun owners in my state to turn over their social media accounts if they want to have a concealed carry permit. Never mind the fact that these mass murderers and school shooters, they're doing what they're doing in full view. Like they're literally posting these manifestos and they're literally showing you what they plan to do on social media. Nobody's paying attention, which is part of the problem. See, the sad thing about it, what they don't talk about when they talk about these school shootings, the reality, and I made a poll about this, the reality is if you were to make a profile of people who fit in to the persona or the characteristics of one of these mass murderers, half the men in this country would fit that profile. They don't have women because the women are busy showing their scooch off on Instagram and Facebook, so the men don't want to engage with the women. The women themselves don't want the men to engage with them unless they're the man that they want. Like, unless you're the super rich Mr. Big, the women don't want to be bothered by you. So a lot of these dudes are sitting at home. What are they doing to pass time? They're on their PlayStation 5. I like attacking PlayStation 5, so, just bear with me. But they're on their PlayStation 5. They're on their Xbox Series X or whatever the fuck they call that thing. They're on their laptops. They're on their desktops. They're sitting around playing video games. And they got nothing else to do. They've got no wife. They've got no children. They have no part of society to uphold. So what do they ultimately do? Well, there's a word called anomie, ANOMIE, which basically says you've got a group of people who don't fit into the cultural or societal norms. When they see that they have no women, they have no family, they have no place in society, they may have money coming in, but they've basically got nothing to do with it. They've got money that's coming in. They're sitting around gambling on cryptocurrency. They're sitting around gambling on the stock market online. They're forming these basically cults of men. This is the thing about red pill that the red pillers don't want to talk about. The reality is these incel mass murderers are likely to come out of these communities because you have these communities of these incels, and these people have no connection whatsoever to society. So if you were to really do these profiles and you're trying to profile these people, most men are going to fit that profile. So what you have now is you have a government that's trying to disarm the people. That's never going to work because, guns, illegal guns, they're everywhere. So the only way forward is to basically protect yourself with more weapons. So, and I know a lot of people don't like that idea, but hey, you're going to end up, defenseless when you're up against the lone wolf who's armed with the freaking assault rifle or whatever it is, and you have nothing. But the reality is protecting yourself is the only way forward because at this point, you've literally created a portion of society that literally wants to watch society burn. It's just like, you remember the Joker in Batman, what was it, The Dark Knight? It's like, yeah, there's some men that just want to watch everything burn. If they have no part of it, if they have nothing vested in the society, they could care less about your children. They could care less about you. They could care less about your property. These people are everywhere. When that's the crazy thing. I've complained about New York City subways. I've complained about our mass transit. Do you understand that despite the fact that you hate these and you want to lock them all up, but you hate these murderers, these rapists, these child molesters, when you get on our public transportation system, you're sitting next to them. They're everywhere. They're in plain sight. Some of them have been captured and caught and they've been forced to register themselves. A lot of them haven't. But that also goes for these mass murderers. They're right next to you. They're in your classroom. They're in your child's classroom. They're next to you on the train. They're next to you on the bus. They're shopping next to you in Costco. They're shopping next to you in Walmart. They're right there. But you don't notice them because you don't care. And that's what it comes down to. Like, they keep on talking this mental health nonsense. Oh, yeah, well, we need to put more money in mental health. And we need to get these people to help. Listen, these people, everybody knows who these people are. You know who they are. The reason why there's no intervention is because you got better shit to worry about. You got to worry about going on your trip to Maldives. You got to worry about flying business class to Bora Bora. You got to worry about, you got to worry about buying a new car. You got to worry about buying a new house. You got to worry about running your business. These people are right there, but you don't see them because you don't give a fuck. It's just like the homeless. When you see homeless people, there are some people who hand them a couple of dollars. There are a lot of people, probably more than 95%, that pretend not to see them and walk right past them. But those homeless people are still there. They're right next to you on the bus. They're right next to you on the train. They're right there in front of the grocery store as you walk out, waiting for a handout. But you don't pay attention. They're right there. I kind of feel sorry that Joe Biden's presidency is going to be seen as a complete disaster. I think by the time his presidency is over, Joe Biden will have presided over the most mass shootings of any president ever. I think by the time his presidency is over, he may have presided over the most vicious and the most heinous of them. But this doesn't happen in a bubble. This is all part of everything else. When you have a society that is literally collapsing because its economy is unsustainable, because its jobs have been outsourced to Asia, because gas prices are unaffordable, because food prices have gone up, because there's no baby formula for the person's baby, because there's no tampons to stuff in this chick so she doesn't bleed. When you're in a situation like that, basically you have a population that's on edge. There is a racial component, as I've pointed out a couple of times in these manosphere panels, which, pretty much I get ignored on them because these dudes are just sensationalists. They're about talking points. But the reality is, the last census showed that Asians and Hispanics are the only two groups right now that are growing. Whites have fallen back. Whites are in recession, basically, to use simpler terms. Blacks have fallen back more than whites. One of the things that you may notice about these abortion bans is that they've constantly tried to put a black face on it. Oh, yeah, well, these abortion bans are going to hurt. They're going to hurt the blacks and Hispanics, the brown people. They're going to hurt the brown people. The way I see it is the thing that hurts black and brown people is aborting the babies. And I'm not just going to call them fetuses. I'm going to call them babies because for the most part, these fetuses are healthy enough to be carried to term to become babies. So personally, I think Clarence Thomas is kicking ass and taking names. That's probably my favorite Supreme Court justice right now. And if you're a conservative, he should be yours too, because he's the one person you've got up there who's literally telling people who look like him, nah, this bullshit that you've got going ain't gonna fly no more. So every white American who considers himself a conservative or a libertarian, they should be supporting Clarence Thomas. Because Clarence Thomas, he seems to be your last line against the darkness to be melodramatic. But when you've got a society that is this morally corrupt, and you have a society that's this morally bankrupt, that is controlled by media, that puts a battery in their back and tells them who to hate, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. I said it a long time ago. Every time I watch one of these mass murders, I'm like, oh, gee, where will the next one be? Everybody's, oh, we got to stop the violence. I grew up in the 80s New York City. It was more violent then than it is now. And ironically, I never believed in any of that nonsense. I never believed stopping the violence. What are you kidding? It's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. Not here. If you want to stop the violence, you need to take as much money as you can and move to like the jungles of like somewhere else. You need to move like to the woodlands of Canada, where you'll be nice. The only way there'll be violence is if there's nobody there. That's basically how it is. So you got to go. And even Canada's fucked up now. They got shootings and shit left and right now. You got Copenhagen. Who the fuck is in Copenhagen? Who's shooting at people? These are all white people living there. So there's no racial component. And they shooting each other. You got that guy Breivik in Norway who shot up like 90 people. He called himself a white supremacist. He shot up like 90 people, but they were like all white. I'm like, really? It's like, this is ridiculous. But we've created this society, and now you're just going to have to deal with it. So until you're ready to elect somebody like me, actually in America, I don't think that would make a big difference because you've got a Congress and you've got Supreme Court checks and balances. I think that's the reason why people like Trump so much. They like Trump because he was a totalitarian. As much as he could be, given this country's constitution, he was a totalitarian. He spoke with authority, and he shit all over anybody who was stupid enough to try to go against what he felt was the will of the people. I think that's the reason why he enjoyed so much popularity. I really do. I think really that's what people want. It's like that, Kevin Spacey made that speech in Call of Duty where he's like, people really don't want democracy. What they really want is they want boundaries and rules, and they want protection for themselves and from others and whatnot. And that was a really good speech because it was absolutely true. This isn't a democracy. This is a republic. You get what you vote for. When you go out there and you elect representatives, you elect these representatives in order to govern basically for you. You don't govern yourself. This is not a democracy. This is a republic, a constitutional republic. Democracy creates basically a gang of a majority against the minority. That basically ends up being fascism, ultimately. That's not what this country is supposed to be. Unfortunately, when you've elected leaders that are this incompetent, mostly because most of you don't know civics, well, this is the logical consequence. You get a society that's on edge. You get people that are on edge. You get shortages. You get lack. And ultimately, you get chaos.